Hello, welcome to the Awakening Health Show. Today we're going to talk about a subject that is really dear to my heart, something I've been involved with for many years, and that is the GAPS diet and the brilliant work of a neurosurgeon from Russia who eventually moved to the British Isles, I guess, to England. And she had a child who was severely autistic, and she was looking for answers for what to do for him. And she worked with a series of diets because the medications that they were offering to her just were not anything she was willing to give to her son. And this is a woman who really understood these things. As a neurosurgeon, she knows more than the average bear about the brain. And she was unwilling to give the medications that were being suggested to her own son. The other thing that's interesting about her story is that she had her son was normal until after getting the MMR vaccine. And after the MMR vaccine, he started to go downhill very quickly and was fully incapable of speaking, functioning, stimming and having quite a horrendous time, as many of the autistic children do. And she found answers through diet and through lifestyle. I personally use her diet to a great degree, but I include other things as well. And there are a number of us GAPS practitioners who are bringing into play not only the GAPS diet, but a deeper understanding of the autonomic nervous system through homeopathy. And there is a show that I just recently did that is on neuroplasticity that talks about many different aspects of neuroplasticity, from movement and exercise to different devices that can be used to support the brain in making changes. Some of these things would be appropriate, some not appropriate to children with autism, because when we're working with flashing lights, we cannot use these with children who have any tendency towards having any type of seizure activity. So today, what we're going to do is talk about, in particular, the profound connection between the gut and the brain and the gut. Natasha opened up an amazing world to me when she shared her information about the gut-brain connection and how through diet she was able to heal the gut of her son and then the gut of hundreds of the children who came to see her, and how that profoundly affected brain function, which then the diseases that these children were carrying, or the horrible malfunctioning that they were having in their brains, were able to come to a peaceful state and open up and learn and become, in many cases, not only normal children, but children who excelled on unbelievable levels. I mean, truly brilliant, innovative, creative thinking human beings who are making huge contributions to the world from their brilliant minds and from the suffering that they went through as experiencing autism. So I'd like to talk a little bit too about things that we might be able to do to prevent autism, and things that we might be able to do as potential parents. And so this is going to be a whole series of programs. I can't get through all this information in just this one little talk about GAPS. But I would like to start by telling you that by working with what we call healing and sealing your gut, it can make the most profound difference on multiple levels of our lives. Natasha found that after she was working with children with autism and had found amazing results with these children with this diet, their parents started using the diet for themselves and for the whole family, because it was a little challenging of a diet to do just for one child. And the children who had eczema, their eczemas went away. The children who had problems with asthma, their asthmas went away. Children who actually even had type 1 diabetes. Oftentimes, these young children are getting type 1 diabetes from the toxicity that their parents are carrying and the toxicity in their own bodies. And their type 1 diabetes even shifted and changed, which we say is impossible. And they were able to function as normal people without diabetes. All these things are possible when we begin to really work in harmony with nature, when we feed ourselves real natural foods, when we're giving ourselves things that will support a healthy brain and a healthy gut, rather than using what I call frankenfoods, pretend foods, fake foods, crappy carbs, of things that are, that's a term, by the way, by somebody who I totally, deeply love and respect. His name is Jimmy Moore. And he talks about the ketogenic diet. And you'll see that I also am a great believer in the ketogenic diet. But one of the things you'll notice if you were to do the GAPS diet in all of its progressions, is that you begin on a ketogenic diet. And when we are using ketones to support our brains and reduce inflammation in our gut and reduce inflammation throughout the entire body, we are profoundly helping our bodies to come back into balance and find its own way. The body doesn't need to be focused on clearing out toxins. It can be focused on bringing us radiant health. And that's what it's all about. Radiant, awesome health that allows us to enjoy the gifts of life and the beauty of nature and the love of people in our lives and deeper experiences. So I'm going to start out by showing you the foundation book. And this is called The Gut and Psychology Syndrome. For people who have a lot of discipline and are willing to read this book, you can find out just about everything you need to know about the GAPS diet from this book. And it'll take you through all of the different processes, all the foods that you prepare, and the stages and how to recognize them and everything else. This is a video that was made and by two lovely women who've been working with Natasha for quite a while, who are also cooks, and they're on the back of the video. And this takes you through how to prepare all of the foods that she talks about. And the primary foods are bone and meat broths. We start with a meat broth, and then we move to bone broths. Homemade kefir, where we use kefir grains and raw whole fat milk. And you can also make kefir with cream or a blend of cream and whole fat milk, so we have more fats that are very, very healing to the children's brains and our brains. And then they also show how we make fermented vegetables, which is a way that for centuries people all over the world have been able to get wonderful probiotics from their food. And then for people who need a little bit of support, this book is called GAPS Stories. And GAPS Stories are basically written by people who have used the GAPS diet for all different types of problems. On Natasha's front book here, she talks about dyspraxia, autism, ADD, dyslexia, ADHD, depression, schizophrenia. But people who have Crohn's disease have written their stories in this book. People with all types of serious issues have talked about what's happened for them personally when they did the GAPS diet. Many of them only read the book or listened to a lecture online with Natasha and learned how to do the diet in that way. And they wrote to her. Others have found people like myself who are certified GAPS practitioners who have helped them through the process and helped to support them in doing the diet and other things that work hand in hand beautifully with GAPS. So these are their stories, and sometimes Natasha will just add a sentence or two or a paragraph or two at the end of their story saying, her appreciation for these people and also why she felt like they got the benefits that they got. And this is a Little Gaps workbook, and this can help parents to learn how to work with the GAPS diet, and it's also something that we use when we do classes for groups, where we will explain GAPS programs, where parents get to share their experiences with each other, where we share recipes, and as parents we find out so much that may not be in the books that we can share and use to support each other. And this is a wonderful book written by Hilary Boynton and Mary G. Brackett, and this is a really fun cookbook of GAPS foods. But I can tell you that you can go online and you can just put in the letters GAPS and then any food that you would like to eat. So this diet doesn't have to be restrictive as far as flavors and things like that go. It's more of an exchanging out things that are harmful to the gut and harmful to the brain to things that are wonderful for the gut and wonderful for the brain that are made from real foods. So for instance, a lot of children are crazy about pizza. You can make GAPS pizza, but instead of using flour, which we don't use in this, that's made from grains. We don't use any grains in this diet, and we'll talk about that part in a second. But what you can do is take a cauliflower and steam it and squeeze it through a bag and get the dried cauliflower and mix that, if the child is not sensitive to dairy, with a high-quality grass-fed raw milk cheese, and add some garlic and some herbs like oregano, and actually make a beautiful, I think even tastier, pizza crust out of cauliflower instead of white wheat flour, which is harmful, and we can talk about why, and for quite a while, a little later on. But you can definitely make real beautiful food. Pizza, you can start out with fresh tomatoes and fresh basil and real olive oil and garlic and make a beautiful tomato sauce and put your vegetables on and get good quality grass-fed cheese and melt that on top, and and get your children in the kitchen with you and make it a whole family experience, because we've lost a lot of that, to be honest with you. We have this fast food mentality where we have our children sitting in front of television sets and computers and Game Boys instead of being with us in the kitchen, helping us make real food and enjoying each other's company and telling stories and laughing and having fun. So that's a quick little run through of Natasha's books and some of the books that are really helpful for the GAPS diet. So there are different phases of the GAPS diet, and each of those phases are talked about, in the Gut and Psychology Syndrome book. And the first one is kind of limiting, and it depends on the child that we're working with as to which phase we're going to start with. When children have a really serious, or any of us, not just children, but when we have loose stool and diarrhea as a big part of our gastrointestinal issues, which is so fascinating, almost every child with autism has really serious gut issues. We find that we do much better to start the children on a diet that's based with meat broth that's made from pasture-raised animals, be it chicken or beef or lamb. We can even use pork. We can use fish. And what we do is one of the quickest, easiest ways to start would be with a chicken soup. We've all heard about chicken soup as Jewish penicillin. And this Jewish penicillin is great for your gut and for your brain. So basically you just take a whole chicken and throw it in a pot. And put in your favorite things like onion, garlic, celery, carrots, parsley, and salt and pepper. And you cook it for at least an hour to an hour and a half. And remove the chicken and put the skin and the bones back into the soup. And I take the chicken out so that the chicken is not overly cooked. It still has some flavor. And I would cook this for at least another 3 hours. And at that point, because you have basically bone in there, I would place a little bit of apple cider vinegar in to help pull the minerals out of the bone. Whenever we make just a bone broth, we take the bones and add about 2 tablespoons of an organic apple cider vinegar to the cold water that you're going to use for cooking the bone broth. And we basically will just soak that for an hour or so to help pull the minerals into the fluid so that we get all the minerals that are in bones in the bone broth. So I just want you to know that when you have a meat and bone broth, like what we're talking about here, or just a bone broth, that's beneficial to everyone who feels that they want to support their bone health, the collagen of their skin, their hair, their nails, their eyes. Collagen is a building block of all the tissues in our body. So you will be getting that when you have bone and meat broth. I find it really interesting that people who are using ketogenic diets talk about fasting on bone and meat broth. And we're starting off this whole program with Natasha, with the children, with just bone and meat broth first to see how they do. And then once we take them through bone and meat broth, we start them with egg yolks if they're okay with egg yolk. So I'm going to talk to you about something right now that is beneficial to you whether you're doing a GAPS diet or any kind of diet. If you're one of those people that seems to be sensitive and you have a hard time with different foods, you can take a little bit of that food and just rub it on the inner part of your wrist at night before you go to bed. And in the morning, if you have a red spot there, that's a food that you should not eat. If you don't have a red spot there and you still get discomfort when you eat the food, that's an indication that your gut needs to be supported, healing and sealing that gut. And once you've healed and sealed the gut, you'll most likely be able to eat that food with no discomfort in the future. But we like to check these foods, particularly with children with serious brain or gut issues, on their wrist and make sure that they don't get a red spot. And the other thing that you can do, which is a little bit more challenging with someone other than yourself, is to leave some food, the food that you're interested in by the side of your bed, and to put some of that in your mouth when you first get up in the morning. Before you do, you check your heart rate with a watch with a second hand or your cell phone, and you can check it for 15 seconds to see what your, and multiply that by 4 to see what your heart rate is. Then you choose some of the food that you're interested in checking really well and just relax in bed for at least 15 more minutes, and then check your rate again. And if your heart rate has gone up by 4 beats per whole minute, so that would be if your heartbeat's gone up by 1 beat per 15 seconds, that means that you're sensitive to the food. But if it goes up then more than 4 beats for a minute, there's a very strong likelihood that that food is going to be one that will cause you a lot of problems, and you want to stay away from it for a while until you've done the work to heal and seal your gut. Now, one of the things that Natasha doesn't talk about, but we've found has been really helpful for people, just in case you're one of those people who just says, I just have too much in my life going on. I can't really do a full GAPS program. One of the things that some people find will really help them is to include those bone and meat broths in their diet, include real fermented vegetables in your diet, but also try including a really well-made colostrum in your diet. We've been using one for years called Sovereign Labs colostrum, and we found that for many people, if you take a teaspoon to a tablespoon of that before your meals, like 15 minutes before your meals, it can make a huge, huge difference in digestion and supporting the healing of the gut. The other thing that's really important is to recognize the role that animal fats, particularly, and coconut fat, plays in healing and sealing our gut. It's important when we're dealing with animal fats that we are getting animal fats from healthy animals, because if they're not healthy, their fats will not be healthy. And so that means we want animal fats from grass-fed animals that are out in the sunshine, getting the benefit of the sunlight. We need that benefit as well. And interestingly enough, Natasha makes part of her program, an absolutely essential part of the program for it to work, is that we have time outside in the sun every day. And she encourages playing with your children out in the sun. And if you're using this for your own health, lying out in the sun, as we've talked about many times, on the grass itself will help to not only support the electrical parts of our brain, synapse production, but also the magnetic part of our body's essential nature for healing and sealing the gut and our whole body. So those are some very important things. One of these days I'd like to actually do a video for you showing you how easy it is and how inexpensive it is to make your own fermented vegetables. And unfortunately, when somebody else makes them for you the way they should be made, it's expensive. But I can tell you, you can find them at almost any health food store, and you need to buy the ones that are in the refrigerated section. Typically, there's, they'll say raw kraut or something of that nature, or kimchi, and there's many different types. And these days, I was so amazed, I found something called kimchi shots. The kimchi may be a little bit too spicy for your children, but you might really enjoy it yourself. And so if you're using this for yourself, you might find that the kimchi shots, in a pinch, will be really helpful for you. But the main thing that I want you all to understand is that there are some foods that are super beneficial and a major part of your GAPS program. And that's starting with bone and meat broth, and then moving to just bone broth. We start with bone and meat broth, particularly if we have any anxiety or agitation issues going on, because there's very high levels of L-glutamine, which is a very healing amino acid. But if we have too much glutamate in the brain, which is common when we're agitated, the L-glutamine will just add to that load. So until we get you balanced, until we see agitation and anxiety move away, we would prefer that you have a combination of bone and meat broth, so the percentage of L-glutamine will not be really high. The other thing that's a major part of the program, of course, is the fermented vegetables. But there are a couple of supplements that Natasha recommends. And these supplements are actually food supplements that our ancestors ate if they lived by the ocean. And the major one is real cod liver oil that has not been heat treated, because the vitamins A, D, and K are so high in our cod liver oil. And there's a particular type that Natasha has used for years and had fabulous results with. Some people are questioning it, but Natasha says the results really speak louder to her than anything else. And that's a fermented cod liver oil, and it's made by Green Pastures. And we always have numerous flavors here. But we build up the amount of cod liver oil for the children so that they start out with a small amount and we take them into greater and greater amounts. The other thing that we do is for most children, we have to give them some form of a probiotic. And those are the two primary supplements that we use in this program. We start with a teeny tiny amount and then we build the amounts as well. If you happen to be nursing your baby and we discover some form of autism or serious issue, neurological issue that comes in, the mother can actually put both the cod liver oil and the probiotic on the breast and nurse her baby that way and start her baby with those tastes early on in that particular way. So I'd like to thank you all so much for joining me today and starting to open a little bit to the idea of a GAPS diet. And at the same time, I would encourage you to consider looking at information on a nutritionally based ketogenic diet to give us a little bit more perspective of wonderful, good quality fats that we can add to the diet. And there's so much information these days by people like Dr. Perlmutter, who is a neurologist, about the benefit of these fats, these saturated fats for the brain, as well as things like olive oil and flax oil and macadamia nut oil and things like that. But we have been basically educated to believe that fats are bad for us, and it's time we put things straight and re-educate ourselves about how beneficial these can be. So I also like personally to include some work I've been doing for over 30 years that's called metabolic typing, to help to discover the specific vegetables and types of meats and seafood and poultry that are best for your specific child. So I love bringing these together with homeopathics that help to open the pathways for children to make it easier for them to heal both the gut and the brain. So thank you so much for joining us. And in our new shows that we'll be doing, I'll be providing more information about all those things that I just threw at you here at the end of the show. I hope you have a wonderful day. Please feel free to send us information about what you think about the shows, and we appreciate you.